Evidence of the Afterlife with Maverick Vardager.
Welcome to Evidence of the Afterlife. I'm your host, Maverick Vardager. This is the podcast's 1-year anniversary episode. Since the show's launch exactly 1 year ago, Evidence of the Afterlife has had over 40,000 downloads all around the world. There are listeners in over 88 countries, which includes over 3,200 cities. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of my listeners. Thank you for your support over this last year. I truly appreciate all of you. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, or a thumbs up for the podcast. Following the show and leaving positive reviews allows Evidence of the Afterlife to continue to succeed and reach more people. I'd also like to give a shout out to Paul, who just became a patron through the podcast's Patreon. Thank you so much to everyone who has helped to support the cost of the show. Anyone can support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. The more you give, the more you get through Patreon, which includes merchandise and exclusive access behind the scenes. Your support through Patreon helps cover the web hosting expenses to keep the show going. Evidence of the Afterlife has always been a commercial-free podcast, and I intend to keep it that way. Please check out the links in the episode's description box for more details and consider becoming a patron of the podcast. There are also links to get your own copies of my 3 books, The Vibrational State, Leadline, and Her Eyes Were Green. Each book is available in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. Next year, I will be releasing my 4th book, Awake Eternal. Stay tuned for more details on that. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guests, Florentin Ionita. Florentin is an astral projection teacher and explorer. He has used his technical background from the Hollywood visual effects film industry to create the world's most complete astral projection program. The Astral Projection Accelerator Program is a program designed to take a complete beginner who has never had any astral projection experiences and train them to experience their own frequent astral projections. Welcome to the show, Florentin.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great seeing your previous podcasts, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Everybody, today's guest is Florentin Ionita. Why don't you tell us about yourself and your background? What got you into astral projection and teaching it?
Okay, great. Sure. So I would say I'm a truth seeker, a light worker. I'm somebody that has always been wanting to know more about the universe, metaphysics, and meaning of life, and all these big questions. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was the movie The Matrix, which was probably one of those key moments where I was like, when I started to ask myself more questions and really start to question what reality is. And The Matrix, for those who haven't seen it, it's a very beautiful movie about a character called Neo, who is realizing that he's living in a simulated reality. Mm-hmm. And it's quite interesting because it's when you see that movie, you think it's a science fiction movie, but then as you progress through life and you get into these kind of things, you realize that we do live in a matrix, and it becomes a documentary suddenly, that movie. And so it started with me asking these kind of questions and watching The Matrix. And I was very passionate about, the movie was such a beautiful movie, very well created. And it inspired me to start working with visual effects for movies and create the kind of visual effects that you see in The Matrix. And so I pursued a career as a visual effects artist for many years. I went to school, a couple of years to study computer graphics. I started working with commercials, started working with different types of movies. And then finally, I worked with a bunch of different Hollywood movies like Iron Man 2, Superman, Man of Steel, Total Recall, and many other more movies like that. And I was pursuing my passion, my creative sort of passion. But at the same time, I had this longing for knowing more about the universe, having more answers to my questions, mm-hmm. Which wasn't really coming from working. And it was at this point when I started to go to different retreats and explore consciousness with different tools like meditation, and also like tools like psychedelics. I explored, ayahuasca. I went to different retreats in the Amazon jungle to work with shamans and to explore these kind of things. Um, Different substances as well, like LSD, DMT, when you smoke it, mushrooms, all kinds of things. And it was very interesting. I had very interesting experiences, and it was definitely showing me that there was something else going on around us that we couldn't really touch and feel and taste and see from the physical. And so that, of course, led me even more to want to discover more. And you keep going down the rabbit hole. And the thing with psychedelics is that I feel like it's not very sustainable. You can't really do that all the time. So I was looking for something that was more sustainable. And of course, that led me down the rabbit hole to find astral projection. And it was, people telling me about this practice that you can do to access different states of consciousness without having to take anything, just naturally. And that was what really attracted to me. And so I then went to different workshops to learn from different teachers to actually learn how to astral project myself. And the thing with me is that I'm not the kind of type of natural person that just has, have had these experiences from early childhood or spontaneous had them, at some point. I never really had anything like this. And I was also quite skeptic that if this was even possible. I wanted to believe because when what I heard sounded really interesting and kind of made more sense to me than any other religion I've ever read about. It gave me more kind of an advanced answer to what is going on around us. But I still wasn't really sure if I could really believe it was true until I had my first experience. And then after that, like, I think this is something that's quite common for people when they have their first experience. Everything changes because then suddenly it becomes real. The things you've been reading about, hearing about, it becomes much more real now and tangible because you've had an experience that you cannot explain away as just being a normal dream,
Right.
Or imagination. And so, that happened, and I was still working with movies at that time. And the visual effects movie industry is a very tough industry. You have to work long hours to meet serious deadlines. You pretty much have to give up your life for the industry to be able to finish the work that they ask you to do. And everything is extremely, extremely quality orientated. You have to create the best quality possible and push yourself to the limit. And so you sit in a cinema, in a small cinema, and they sit and look at every single detail, and every single small pixel has to be perfect. And so you learn a lot about paying attention to details, and that's something that definitely I learned in the industry, being very careful with details and learning how to problem solve, how to fix things, and how to think in a creative way or out of the box. And so after I've then in parallel, I was learning how to astral project and stuff. But the thing was that I was going to different retreats, and the retreats are a wonderful place to learn, I find, but they're limited to just a few days. And so after those days, you are on your own and you get stuck. It was not easy for me because, like I said, I'm not a natural at this. So it was like a hit and miss kind of thing. Sometimes I would succeed, sometimes I wouldn't. I wouldn't understand why, and it took me some time to really kind of understand what was going on. And I decided to go within and try to figure out, how could I actually improve this practice for myself? How can I make it more successful? And so, using my skills from the Hollywood movie industry, all my technical skills that I had gotten over the years, I started to create my own soundtracks and my own beats, my own systems, my own, with my own voice, telling me to do different things and helping me to break sleep patterns and these kind of things. And I created a system that then was working for me much, much better than anything else that I was using in the past from other teachers. And at that point, when I started to have more experiences, I realized that this was great. This was really powerful. I wanted to continue, but I didn't really have the time because the movie industry was taking all my time. and I sort of came to a point where it was kind of there was no real passion left to work in the movie industry for me, because what was the point working on another Superman, another Iron Man, another, like, how many movies am I going to work on until I'm going to move on to something else? It just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere else, and it became a bit stagnant in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to feel a bit like the magic was missing. There's something that wasn't fulfilling me. And so I had to stop and ask myself a very important question, which I think it's a very healthy question for a lot of people to ask themselves. And that is, what is the one thing that you want to know more about than anything else in the world? And so when I asked myself that question, it was very clear that was consciousness, astral projection. It was, all of these bigger questions and understanding the bigger cosmos and all of these things. That was the most important thing for me. And I, obviously realized that working in the movie industry wasn't fulfilling that need anymore. And the astral projection practice I was doing was. And so I wanted to do it full time. I wanted to be able to practice full time and really pursue this. And at the same time, I also understood that this was not something that was going to fulfill me if I was just doing it on my own. Just me having these experiences wasn't going to be enough. It was more about, now that I've discovered this and created tools, I really wanted to find ways to teach other peoples and show them the things that I've learned, and sort of together in a process of unity, being able to move forward, and me learning these things more. At the same time as I'm learning, I'm teaching this to other people. And then by teaching, you also learn so much. I mean, I've learned so much since I started teaching, from teaching, that it becomes this kind of generator where you just kind of create this generating effect of information and knowledge being generated within. And of course, being able to work with this, with teaching people how to astral project on a daily basis, spending all my time figuring this stuff out, versus working in another job and doing this on the side. You can imagine how much more time and how much more efficient I became at doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Because now all my time goes to figuring out how to solve these problems, how to make people get a body easier, how to create better tools, better systems. And so, yeah, I basically went on this journey of creating the ultimate program that would teach people how to have these experiences on a regular basis.
Well,
and that's what I'm doing today.
That's an awesome background. I didn't know that you were that involved with the movies you're making. And when you mentioned The Matrix, I remember seeing that. I was in middle school as a teenager, and that just radically changed the way I perceive the world. I think a lot of us were like, wow, like I don't think we're living in a machine, but it really makes you question your reality. And like you said, as you age and you experience more of the world, you start to realize we are in some form of a simulation or something. I mean, there's simulation theory. It's one of those things that is talked about and debated, and we can't disprove it. Can't disprove that we're not in some type of a advanced computer or something. There's different dimensions and realms, and then you have the astral realm. So it's very, very relative,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and especially when you, I think one of those moments when you have those epiphanies that you are living in some sort of simulation is when you experience synchronicities.
Mm-hmm.
Synchronicities where you just know, wait a second, this doesn't make any sort of logical sense. This is not a coincidence. There's something more going on around here. What is going on here? Because this doesn't really make sense. And if you like, I could share one funny one that
Sure, yeah.
that I have that happened to me recently when I moved to Barcelona. And so I was very aware of the fact that you can use the power of your mind, affirmations, manifestation, and these kind of things to manifest things. Because I realized that I did it to actually work in the Hollywood movie industry. Okay, so there's an interesting story with that. But I'll just go with the shorter one because I have quite a few of these. But
Okay.
so when I realized that, I was like, okay, well, I know it worked for me, in order to work on movies, which was my childhood dream. How can I use the same techniques to be able to manifest to live in Barcelona? Because I really wanted to leave. I was living and working in London at that time, and it was very cold, and I wanted to live in a warm country. But there was no work for me here in Barcelona, no movie work. So I was like, well, somehow it's gonna happen. I just know I want to live here. So I started to actually moved in with my parents. I thought it was going to be for maybe 3 months. It turned out to be 8 months living in Sweden with my parents. After I have lived in London for 5 years, big city life, moving to Sweden was quite a challenge. But I did it with a very clear purpose that I wanted to move to Barcelona. And every day I would do this little routine where I would listen to a soundtrack that I've created with my own voice, and also very inspiring music in the background. And so the music will amplify my emotions, and then the affirmations that I would speak of in the soundtrack, I will listen to them and really feel every single thing that I would say there. And I would say things like, I would imagine myself being in Barcelona, walking down the streets of Barcelona, enjoying the sunlight, really feeling the sun on my skin, like really visualizing myself being here, basically. And and I was doing that for months. And of course, you go into phases where you start doubting if it's actually working, because it's been another month and you're still not there. But then finally, things worked out. And there's a long story on how I managed to get here. There's many different steps to the journey, but I finally managed to get to Barcelona. And I remember moving into a flat that I wasn't sharing anymore. Now I managed to get to the point where I had a job. I was still working with visual effects, but remotely with a Swedish company. And I was now in Barcelona, stable for the first time. This was like after a year of being here. And I went to a restaurant and just ordered some food. And I was just sitting there thinking, so does this mean that I successfully managed to fulfill my manifestation? And as I'm thinking that thought, I just kind of realized I'm staring at the wall. And on the wall, there's a sign that says on the sign, if you're looking for a sign, then this is it. It's just like so comical. I got goosebumps because it was so on point. And I knew that, okay, that is obviously that's a sign. How did that happen? How does that work? How did this sign end up there before I went into the restaurant? Like, how does this even work? Logically, it doesn't make any sense.
That's
it happened.
I love synchronicity. That's why I put 1111 on the spines of my books. It's just like a little thing I do for anybody that's ever noticed.
Oh, nice.
I just love when that's really come together and you just can't explain it. It's like there has to be some type of higher force like working things out for you. And those are beautiful countries. Spain and Sweden, gorgeous countries.
Mm-hmm.
I went to both of those a number of years ago when I used to travel with a band that I had, and we stayed on the southwest corner of Spain by Malaga and Fuengirola. It was just gorgeous. So I would imagine that your background with movies and graphics, I'm assuming you did like the graphics and the CG type stuff, very visual.
Yeah, all the graphic stuff. Like, for example, on Iron Man 2, I was working on designing how his new heart piece, this Mac 2, would sort of start up, like how the lights would start up, how it would start flashing, how it would be moving inside of it, create all of that, design all of those things.
That's awesome.
And on Superman, I was working on some of the fight sequences at the end. And I mean, it's crazy nowadays, the amount of work that we have to do and the amount of things that people have no idea that it is CG. I mean, for example, in that movie and at the end sequence, the only thing that's real is their faces, their head, the body, the cape is all computer generated. They even had a department where they were just, I don't know, a dozen of people that would just work on the cape, just simulate how the cape would move in the wind, how it would look like in different lighting setups. Crazy.
I can't imagine. I have a background in like amateur graphic design, which is all still images. So I cannot even imagine all the moving parts and the lighting and details. Like But what's cool is a lot of us that are astral projectors, we have backgrounds in visual fields like Jürgen Ziva, he does graphic design. And so it seems to play a part in the visualization process, the attention to detail, like you said. I wonder, have you ever had lucid dreams or did you do that before astral projection?
Did I have lucid dreams before astral projection, or
Yeah.
did I? What was the question exactly?
So based on your attention to detail, I would assume that you probably had lucid dreams growing up or at points in time prior to astral projection.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, it's really interesting because I think the times that I had mm, the most lucid dreams, which was maybe three, not that many, but I had them when I was studying computer graphics, and I was really sort of so excited and inspired to work on this. Like it was difficult to get into the school. To get into school, you had to be a good painter and paint really nice. And I was a shit painter, but I had made some sort of home movies, and they were really cool. So they let me to join the school, and I was so excited to join the school. Every day felt like magic. Like I got to go to school to learn what I love to do, and all my free time I would just spend sitting at home working on different projects, creating graphics. And that's it's actually really interesting. So during that time, I had a few lucid dreams, and I also had this there was this moment where I was thinking about I wanted to make my own little short movie, and I didn't know what it was supposed to be about. And at that point, I just had some random lucid dreams. There was nothing connected to astral projection whatsoever, and I don't know how this happened, but this is quite interesting how things are connected. I was lying in my bed and I was kind of meditating, but I didn't know what meditation was. I was just lying there, kind of visualizing, thinking different ideas of what I could create, what kind of cool short movies I could create. And I came up with this story, and I did film most of the most of it as well, which was about the main character who's going to sleep, and then his soul comes out of his body and flies out the window, and then you get to see like the whole city, all kinds of souls flying out different windows, and they're all going up towards the sky, towards the clouds, and then you get to follow them above the clouds, and then they start to sort of pop out into different portals, different dimensions or something, and then two of them collide, and you get to sort of follow those two, and then one of them these souls start to materialize into another sort of world, which is a dream world, and you start to see the main character materialize into a human, and then there's a girl that materializes into a human too, and then they meet and they have a shared experience, and it's very beautiful, very romantic, very dreamy, and then they're just about to kiss and they wake up, and then the next day he goes out shopping, and he sees this girl, and they walk past, and there's like this deja vu moment, but they just look at each other like, man, do I know you from somewhere? And they just go separate ways, and that's the end.
That's an amazing
Yeah.
story. I can see that. Did you ever get around to making it or turn it into something?
So what happened was I did film everything. I even got funding to do some of the stuff, and we filmed all the green screen scenes and all this, like everything was filmed. But I completely underestimated how much work there is to do visual effects, and also my school, my colleagues, my what they call my students, the colleagues at school, friends at school. So they were supposed to be a part of this little project too, but they all kind of backed up when they realized how much work there was to do, and so the project never actually got finished, unfortunately.
I mean,
But
I'm not sure how you visualize it, but when you were describing that, I could totally see that as being one of those like Pixar shorts, like a CG
yeah,
animation. That would just be a really cool story. And it's funny that you thought of that before you even got into astral projection.
yes, exactly. That's the point. Like how does that work? And it kind of makes me think when I look back at my life, I kind of see all of these different moments where it feels like there's a seed that was planted from birth that was just kind of unfolding or showing me different things, trying to get me on a specific path. Maybe this was already decided before I incarnated that I would have this mission. I think that's how it works. I think we do come here for different reasons that we perhaps plan out from the beginning, and then I think when life starts to get really difficult, when we start to suffer in life, or when things start to get really stressful, I think that's possible that's a sign that we're not on the right path, that we're supposed to do something to get out of whatever we're doing. And usually it's, you know what it is. You usually know within, you know, that you're supposed to quit that job that you don't like your boss, but you're just doing it because you're getting money, you're getting paid, you're paying rent, but you know inside there it doesn't fulfill you, and you just keep going. And then when that happens, usually reality just kind of shows you, you know, gives you more hard time, trying to get you to a breaking point where you just go, okay, enough is enough. I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna follow my passion. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that when you are open to that and you're kind of in tune to like that feeling and you follow that, it leads you into a better place. And I really love how you and I, it sounds like we have very similar walks of life and upbringings. Like we've kind of gone through similar things, although I haven't worked in the movie business. I grew up making movies with my brother and animations, and always had that interest in how things are made. And I think that visual interest led to me having lucid dreams as a kid, because I would notice if something was wrong, like maybe my reflection wasn't in a mirror, or the details on a clock or numbers would scramble and change. So growing up, I would
Mhm.
have lucid dreams, and I remember dreams of flying around my house. And I didn't think about that until later in life when I discovered astral projection. So I probably did it
Mhm.
as a kid and didn't realize what it was. But you know, a lot of the
Yes.
techniques that people suggest for lucid dreaming, which is separate, are looking at fine details. So I suspected that you probably had experience with that. And it also helps to be able to explain the two as similar in ways that they occur when you're not fully conscious, but also be able to dictate the difference, that they're definitely totally different experiences. One, you know, takes place in like a dream world and lasts very short. You can only do so many things. And then an astral projection experience usually occurs in your actual physical surroundings. It involves some level of effort and trial and error to project out, you know, that, and then once you're out, you have the freedom to make as many choices and move around wherever you want. So there, it's cool that you've experienced both, so we can get into the differences of those two things.
Yeah, and it's also cool that I think having been through the 10 plus years of working with this kind of stuff in the visual field, working with visual effects for movies and commercials and these kind of things, it's very useful now for me to be able to do what I'm doing now, because astral projection is a very abstract thing, and there are books about it, but there's not that really, there's not many movies about it, there's not much graphics about it. And so I'm able to use my background now in the visual effects, you know, industry, to be able to create quite interesting videos. And it's one of the things that I'm planning to do, is to create more content to inspire people, the young people as well, to see this kind of stuff visually, like, oh, an out of body experience, what does it look like, you know? And I think if you can make it really cool, then it will inspire more people to want to take up this journey, the spiritual journey.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of times when topics like astral projection make their way into Hollywood, they kind of take on a different, I don't know, they
Yeah,
kinda
it
take it
gets
in a
scary.
direction where it's not what it really is. There's movies out there where it turns into like a horror movie, and then you have mainstream movies like Doctor Strange, where some of it kind of makes sense, like when I compare it to my experiences and what I've read and people I've talked to, and then some of it's just completely off. So it's really good to have people like you that have the the visual creativity and skill set to make these things and make these products and things that can help guide people. So why don't we talk
Yeah.
about those things? What are the programs that you're developing, and what can people do with them, and how can they find them?
So what I did was I really thought about, well, as I just sat down and really thought about, you know, what is it that I would wish I had when I started this journey. You know, what was it that was missing? And there was a few things that stuck out. And so one of the things was that I realized that retreats were just too limited time wise. You need more time to spend with something like this. You need more time to practice. It doesn't help. It doesn't happen necessarily in one week. You might need a few weeks. different people do this differently. Some people do it very easily. Some people can astral project on their first attempt with my program, with some of the tools. But more commonly, it will take a few weeks. And so I was trying to figure out, how can I make this more efficient? How can I create better tools and better systems so that when new people hear about this, they can learn this quicker and better. And so I created a system which has everything in one place. And so it's a 12 weeks program that the first part of the program starts off with making sure that your mindset is in the right place. And mindset is key. Emotional state and all of these things are very important. If you are somebody who has a lot of fear, if you read a lot of fearful things or watch a lot of horror movies, and it's not gonna you're not gonna be able to do it very well, because you're gonna feel too much fear. So it's important to first define, where are you at on the fear scale. Or maybe it's someone that's grieving, someone that just lost their loved one. They want to connect with them with astral projection, but they're suffering from a lot of pain. They're feeling really bad. They're crying. They're shaking. They're just not in a good mental state. So then the first part of the program is to actually go through a healing process. And I have a hypnotherapist and I have a healer on the team that helps the students with different issues, depending on how severe it is. If it's not very severe, if it's just just the basic things like, oh, I've never done this, I'm a little bit worried, maybe I'm not going to come back, but it's not like a serious fear, well, then the tools in the program, just some of the affirmations and manifestation tools that we use would help with that. So there's different sort of levels, and we have when people join the program, there's a sort of application to fill in, so we can find out where they are at, so we know what kind of service we need to provide for them. And once they've gone through that phase, and this is just within the first week, then they're ready to start learning the techniques, ready to start learning how to astral project. And what I found was that people are different. And so I wish there was just this one golden method that would just work for everybody. And you just press this magical button and it would just take you out of body. Maybe in the future I'll be able to create something like that. But at the moment, it's not that easy. There's, people are different and different things work for different people. So I realized quite quickly that it's not enough to just teach one method. You need to give people more ways to have these experiences. And so in my program, I teach 3 different methods, and I call them the indirect, the semi-indirect, and the direct method. And you're definitely probably going to be familiar with some of these. So the indirect is basically how to transition from a lucid dream into an astral projection. And so this is all about becoming aware in your dreams, with reality checks. I provide different tools for each method. So, for example, with the indirect method, you would actually you would listen to different soundtracks that would program you to have these experiences when you fall asleep. You would do different reality checks. I provide different tools for reality checks. And so you slowly train your subconscious to become more conscious. And usually people start having a lot of dreams in this phase. People start saying, oh my God, I never had dreams before. Now I'm having lots of dreams and I remember them. And then people can also start becoming lucid. Not everyone becomes lucid in their dreams, though. It's something that has been shown to be quite tricky. So sometimes it works for some people, sometimes for some people it doesn't. When it works, it's really amazing because they just go to sleep and they can become lucid in their dreams. They don't have to do so much. It just happens automatically. So it's great. But if it doesn't, then there needs to be another way to have these experiences. So then comes the second method, which is the semi-indirect method. And this is basically a method that we do upon awakening from sleep. And so when we are waking up from sleep, we're still in this in-between state. And at that point, we can do specific techniques where we can scan our awareness or imagine different movements. So there's a range of different things we can do. And then we can separate, we can sit up and start the experience, start the out-of-body experience. And to help people with this method, again, I created some special soundtracks that they use to so they would wake up, they would play the soundtrack, and then they'll go to sleep with the soundtrack, and this soundtrack will actually wake them up and tell them what they have to do multiple times throughout the night. So it interrupts their sleep, and it gives them the sort of information that they have to have, because it's very difficult to remember anything when you wake up from sleep naturally. It's hard to like, oh, what was I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this soundtrack really helps people to remember and to take action. And this is one of the, I think, this method alone has been giving a lot of students an astral projection on their first attempt. And they try it for the first time, they go to sleep with this soundtrack, and then boom, they have an astral projection on their first attempt, which is amazing, because I definitely didn't have that when I started. So I'm really happy to be able to create tools that can actually help people to have them quicker and easier than it was for me when I started. And then the final method is the direct method, of course, which is the most common astral projection method that we know of, which is through deep meditation. So we start when we are awake, and we meditate ourselves in a very deep state. When at some point we start to experience non-physical sensations, and then we can do the separation phase, exit the body, and start the experience. And again, with this method as well, I have created a special soundtrack that helps people to get into these kind of deeper states. Because one of the main issues with this method is that, or with all of the methods really, it's the fact that people either fall asleep and they just kind of lose consciousness, and they're just, they wake up a couple hours later like, oh, what happened? I was supposed to astral project. 2 hours later, I wake up and nothing happened. Oh, damn it, I fell asleep again. It's quite annoying. Or they might be trying to meditate themselves into the state, and they're lying there for hours and nothing happens, and they get frustrated. So there's balancing thing that needs to take place, where you need to find that sweet spot between awake and asleep, and you need to get your body to fall asleep, and you need to keep your mind awake on that borderline, and that's when the magic happens. And in order to do so, in the same way that we need training wheels to be able to bicycle, to not fall when we learn how to bicycle, we need training wheels to learn how to astral project, so that we don't fall asleep, or so we don't stay awake too much. So it's really important to have these kind of helps, especially when you start off with something completely new that you've never done before. So of course you're not going to know how to do this, and you need some sort of help. And so that's what the program is providing you with, these tools. It is providing you with videos to teach. Each method has its own series of videos where I explain everything they have to do in a very systematic, step-by-step, organized fashion. I always get praise from my students saying that everything is so organized, and they know what to do, and it's nice to have a system. And then that was super important is that after they've watched this information, they need to be able to ask questions, because of course they're going to have questions. They sometimes they misunderstand things, and so that there comes the coaching. And so on a weekly basis, they can then join a coaching call where it's me and a group of not more than 5 people. It's a small group, because that's how people get the most help. And I sit there and I teach them, I ask, they come with questions about the practice, about maybe something that doesn't work for them. They're tried to do this method, but they're unable to fall asleep. How can they solve that issue? And then I'm able to give them personalized guidance on that coaching session, so that then they can go and start to practice again, and they know what to do. And so they always get their questions answered, and they always know how to progress, so they don't spend their time focusing on frustration, which is very common with this practice if you do it alone. And instead they're focusing on being productive, because they know what they have to do. They just have to do those things, and then they will succeed. So it's a whole system. And then the last part of the puzzle right now, which I've also created, which is so key, is that you want to look at this from a scientific point of view. I'm a very rational kind of person, and of course very technical with my background. And I know that for me, when I had teachers that were talking very wishy-washy kind of language about these things, I couldn't really learn. It didn't really help me to proceed. I needed more practical steps. And so what we then focus on is that every single time that they practice, they then will record their practice in this little system that I have created, which asks them some key questions about their practice. Things like, what time did you go to sleep? When did you wake up? How many hours did you practice? Which method did you use? Which soundtrack? Which position were you in? What did you eat? Did you do the energy work? Like, there's a bunch of questions that is directly related to the factors of success with the practice, and they can then fill in this form every time they practice and save the information. So we start getting an idea of what's happening with their personal practice, because remember, everyone is different. So it's key to actually find out what is it that makes astral projection work for John. It's going to be different to what it works for Julie. So we need to figure out, what it is that works for each person, and they do that through this system. And then once they start to have successful projections, they then have that information there. They see it. Okay, this is what made it happen. It was sleeping these many hours. It was waking up at this time. It was doing this. That's what makes it work for me. Okay, so then they start to have a clue of what it is that works for them, and they start to go more and more on that direction. So this is using the scientific method where you experiment and you look at the results, and then you alternate the experiment and you do it again and again. You keep doing that and fine-tuning the practice and optimizing the practice until you get more and more of these details defined, until you are able to create a projection blueprint. That's what I call it now, which is basically a blueprint of all the things, all the ingredients that goes into having a successful astral projection. And then once you have this projection blueprint, then you're very clear on what it is that works for you. So you know then, okay, I need to do this, and then it's going to happen for me. So then people's success rates are going up tremendously, because it's bringing clarity to something that can be quite abstract for most explorers. They don't really know why it's happening sometimes and why it doesn't. And so really bringing this sort of scientific approach to this spiritual practice is really key. And that's also something that we do in the program, so that people get their projection blueprint defined. And then when they finish the program, they have the tools, they have the knowledge, and they have their blueprint.
Well, that sounds amazing, Florentin. From not having known anything about your program, hearing the steps and the way it's organized, I agree with everything. Like it rings true with my experience, and the way that you break it down and make it understandable and approachable and like everything. I mean, just to go back through it, you mentioned in the beginning that you have to first deal with your fear, and fear is the one major obstacle with astral projection, because when it started happening to me, which was spontaneous, I hadn't read about it or learned about it yet, I was afraid. And that was the major barrier that I had to break through. I had to basically tell myself, well, if I die doing this, then it's for the sake of scientific research. Like we'll see what happens. And if I die, then that means that my spirit left my body, which means I have a spirit. So then I'm going to be okay. So I literally had to make that decision and be like, I'm going to do this. And so I think that's great that you get into that right away in the beginning. And then you start teaching people about dreams and how to remember their dreams. And that helps exercise that kind of memory muscle that connects you to that other side. Because when my projections are most active, it's when I'm remembering everything. I have very, very vivid dream recall. And then if I go through a period where I'm not projecting, I'm also not really retaining my dreams as well. So the way that you work people through these different steps and teach them how to become lucid with your indirect method, I think that's awesome. I've had many experiences where I transitioned from a dream to a lucid dream to astral projection. Semi-indirect, I would say most of my experiences in that realm, where you get in that in-between state, like you mentioned, and there's many names for it: hypnagogic state, in between. I call it the hover state. It's where you either kind of lift up out of that dream and you're aware that you're in bed or you're laying down, and then you use that to transition into projection, which you call semi-indirect method. I think that's great. And then the direct method, basically willful projection through deep meditation. You get ready, you get prepared, and then you go. That's something I haven't been able to do yet. I've gotten to the point where I can enter into part of the vibrational state through meditation, but then I haven't launched out of that yet. So I totally agree with your breakdown: indirect, semi-indirect, and the direct, just all the different ways to do it. And then I agree with what you said with training and practicing and strengthening and all that. I think it's great that you have an opportunity for people to ask questions and to receive coaching. And then I love that you encourage them to record their results and their details. That's something that I did when I used to lucid dream. I had a dream journal. And then when I started projecting, I just kept what I call the astral log. And I didn't know what was happening or what was making it happen. I hadn't read books on it yet. So I just started recording that myself. I wrote down, when did I go to bed? When did I wake up? What did I eat? Because I really wanted to figure out, what am I doing that's making this happen? And over all the different experiences I've had, I have all those details still, which are in the vibrational state, my first book. So it provides that information to kind of see like what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, and I read I listened to your book as well, and I saw that in your book, and I was thinking like, yeah, that's great. He's doing the right thing, and I've seen that with all the astral projections that I know that are really good at this. All of them have done that. Every one of them have been taking notes and sort of analyzing their practice from a scientific point of view, and really try to figure out what's going on. Why am I succeeding sometimes and sometimes not? What is the difference between last night and the day before? And the thing is that the human memory isn't that great. Like, we don't really remember all of these details. If you don't take notes, you will never remember what time you went to sleep on Wednesday last week and what did you eat. And like, it's just impossible. So it's really important to write everything down.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, what is making this happen? Is it meditation? Is it running and exhausting my body? Is it what I'm eating? Is it alcohol or lack of alcohol? What are the things that are making it more conducive? So I think that's awesome. And you have to write it down. As soon as you wake up and you end a projection, you got to write down those details, because similar to a dream, they will kind of fade and trickle away and like disintegrate. So this is the Astral Projection Accelerator Program, right?
Yes.
Correct. Where can people find that? Where can people find that and get involved?
Yes. So I'm active on Facebook, but the main website where people can join the program, or actually they can start by watching my video where I explain a bunch of things. It's a free astral projection training video on my website called elasticperception.com. And they can watch that video and get familiar with what's going on there. And yeah, if they think it sounds good, then they can book a free call with me, where we will just go through their situation, where they are at with the practice. Are they complete beginners? Have they never done it? Maybe they've done it before, but they want more control over it. People come to me with completely different, at different stages. Some people are pure beginners that just heard about it and they wanted to do it. Some people have been doing it for a while, but they haven't managed to figure out why it's working and why it doesn't work sometimes. All kinds of different levels. And they can then, on that call, it's a free call where we just talk about all of these different things and we find out if we can work together. And after that free call, we will know, and we can go from there into starting the program. Another thing that I want to mention as well that the program has, which is actually really important, I forgot to mention it, is the community. It has a very powerful community where all of these lovely students, they connect with each other, and they are able to share information and talk to each other. And that's something that I didn't think about so much in the beginning, that was going to be very helpful, but I see it now how it's like extremely helpful, because people have so much interesting things to share, and they motivate each other and they keep each other accountable, and they share their experiences, like, oh my God, it happened last night. I got a body. It was amazing. I saw my hands. They were transparent. And then someone else like, oh my God, really? I just joined the program. I can't wait to have my experience. And then, that excitement is so helpful when you're trying to learn these things, especially if you're doing alone, from home somewhere in whatever you live. It really helps to have that community that can help you, inspire you to move forward, so that you just can't wait to have your experience.
Yeah, and for all the listeners out there, I didn't know any of the details of this program prior to us talking right now, and this is unsolicited. I would have to say that I really endorse this program. I think that the way that Florentin's describing it and the breakdown and the different steps and the things that are available to you, I would really challenge you guys to check this out, because I think it's going to be a great program and that it's going to help you experience this for yourself. And that's really what it takes to get into astral projection, is going from someone who's interested to someone that's experienced it. It's one of those things that you have to really experience it to believe it. I know for me, if I would have heard about it prior to it happening to me, I would have probably not believed that this was possible. I would have probably thought, well, it's just some type of extremely vivid dream. And then once you do experience astral projection, it just radically changes your worldview. I mean, the direction of my life changed after that. And I got into writing these books and then starting a podcast and then networking with all these people all over the world, and really looking for the answers. Like you said earlier today, like, what is the one thing you want to know more about than anything else in the world? I want to know the truth. I'm a truth seeker. I want to find out, how does all this work? Are we more than our physical bodies? And I think that your program sounds awesome, man. I really have to say that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it coming from you, because I know that you've been around for a while, and you can tell what is good from what is not. And it's a program that is constantly evolving as well. It's something that it's really exploding at the moment. Like, more people are joining. I think we're now going to be about 10 people on the team. And really the goal with what I'm doing is to I've looked at the bigger picture, and I realized that what's really important is really that this practice is not something that is just underground that some people do. It's going to be, I want it to be something that it's easier to do, and people can do it easier and quicker. And that means that more people can do it. And that means that it becomes a thing that people talk about, and they'll be like, man, I asked project last night. Oh, really? My friend did it as well. And like, this becomes this thing that people will start talking. And of course, this brings up a lot of very crucial topics, because astral projection is linked with so many important things that has to do with life, like the answers to all of these life questions that we're talking about. And instead of going to religion to get the answers from a book, which I think is never satisfying for anyone, because it's just a belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really the experience that makes the whole difference. The whole deal is to experience something. It's when we experience something that we really learn something. If someone just came down and said, "Hey, I'm from the sky, and I know the answers to all your questions," they will actually tell you all the answers. It wouldn't actually really make a big impact. It would just be like some information download, like, okay, that sounds very cool. But it's when you experience something, that's when you really understand. That's when you really go, wow, I experienced oneness,
Right.
Everything is connected. Oh, wow. Like when you experience it with all your senses and with your being, that's when you really have that transformation, when you come back and you see the world differently, you see yourself differently, you see people around you differently, and you also take action in changing the way you live your life, the way you're more compassionate towards other people. You just see things differently. And that's something that only can happen when you have an experience that has shown you something new, something that you haven't been experiencing before. And I think that's what's so powerful with this practice. And although you can experience these kind of states on substances like psychedelics, like I was saying before, it's not for everybody, and it's quite it can be quite intense to have those experiences. I would like to make it more a natural, practice that is healthy, and it's something that anyone can do, even a kid, and it's gonna show them things that will help them with their spiritual journey. And I think that this type of things is what can change the world into a more productive, a more loving direction. Because once you realize that this is not everything, that this physical life isn't that the all, that there's more, then when you think about that, when you think about that you had a previous life or previous lives, and when you think about that you are going to have another life after this, that there is a purpose to your life, that like all these concepts then become very interesting to find out more about, like, okay, so what does that mean? Where do I come from? What are we? What happens afterwards? And like all these concepts becomes very important. And I think they're so crucial to us as a species right now in this moment in time, for us to be able to really develop ourselves into a spiritual way, so that we can move away from the sort of systems that we've been using so far, with capitalism and consumerism, and go towards more of a spiritual way of living and a spiritual way of seeing each other, where we see each other as one, as one consciousness, and we don't see each other as competitors. That I'm going to do better than you. You're my competitor. Fuck you, because you're this skin color or whatever. Like, no, it's a more of a unity, a celebration of life, something completely different. And I think that's possible only when people have an experience of these things, not when they just read it in a book.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. People that don't realize we're so much more than just our physical bodies in this one brief lifetime. It's kind of like they're in that every man for himself mentality, like this animalistic struggle to survive. Like, I have to fight for what's mine. And when you are able to see beyond that, you see the beauty of everything, that it's more of like this orchestra of all these things going on. And it's not this like brutal contest. And I agree, like you said earlier, that people look to religion and they try to learn, and I've done that myself, and you can really only get to belief or faith, but once you experience something yourself, that's when you get to know something, it to be true. And what's also kind of funny is when you read religious texts like the Bible through the lens of someone that's astral projected, you actually see evidence of astral projection in the Bible. Some of the stories and the details that they tell, you can tell that it's an out of body experience. That's exactly what they're talking about. So,
Yeah.
a lot of the information that is in the Bible could have come from an OBE. And how awesome is it that each and every one of us has that ability native to us, that you just have to learn how to harness that and train it and work at it. It's like anything else, any other skill in life. You have to work at it and put in the effort to develop that talent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I agree.
let's maybe talk about some of your astral projection experiences, or maybe some of the successes that your students have had, things that you could share with us today that would inspire the listeners and give them a better understanding of what all this is. Maybe for anyone out there who this is their first time hearing about astral projection, or they haven't experienced it for themselves, or just any of us, just to kind of learn from each other.
Okay, sure. Absolutely. Well, I can share a couple of different things. I can share my first astral projection, or one of my first. I actually can't remember exactly which one of them it was, but this was definitely one of the the two or the three of them that I always will remember. And it was during the time when I was learning this, and I was at my home, and I was trying to do this, and I passed the stage where I wasn't falling asleep anymore, because that can be a stage for people where you fall asleep every time, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
I got to a place where I was able to stay awake now, but now the second problem comes. I wasn't able to get anywhere. I was just awake for hours, nothing happened. And then I got some tips from people, different people that are good at this, and they're like, "Dude, you have to surrender." And that is, I think, a very important key for this practice. For everyone that has ever done this as well, they know that they have to surrender to it so that it happens. And so when I did that, it's a very profound surrender. It's not just like a mental thing. It's a full body, full being surrendering thing that you have to do. And when I did, in that moment, I fell through my bed, and it was a very physical experience. I fell through the bed, and then through the ground, and then through the floors of this house I was living in. I can feel different objects and things passing through me, and I can feel my fingers, my astral fingers, touching different surfaces, and I was sort of just going through this different materials, and I can feel them going through my body. And it's a very, very real feeling of passing through things, and you can really feel different textures. And I passed through, and then I was going faster and faster and faster, and I was like really feeling this pull. and I couldn't see anything. And this is quite common as well in the beginning, that we don't have a vision, and the vision is something that you have to like work on to make it appear. And so I couldn't see anything. At first, it was just black, but I could feel myself moving. I could feel all the different objects. I can hear things, and I can feel this movement going through, going downwards, and it was going faster and faster. And then after a few moments, I started to also see. And I started to see that I was heading towards a planet, and I was going really, really fast. And at that point, unfortunately, I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, what planet is this? Where am I going? Wow. And then of course, I came back to my body, and I was like,
Wow.
whoa, what was that? And of course, I also regret that I freaked out, because I should have just kept going and see where, what was this planet? Where was I taken? Where was I going?
Mm-hmm.
What would I've learned if I didn't stop myself, if fear didn't stop myself? And that was like the first experience. Oh man, it was just, when you have your first experience like that, and it's so convincing to you, and it's so real, and it's so amazing, and you just get so inspired to just keep practicing and keep having experiences.
Yep.
I remember I was getting to, when I go into periods when I'm practicing a lot, I can then have multiple sort of exits in one session. So I would practice for a bit, and then I'll get out of body. Then maybe I'll come back. Then if I'm just laying still, I can go out again. And I've had a night where I went out 8 times in one session.
Nice.
But of course, that's maybe not the best thing to do, because it's difficult to remember then all of the projections that you've had. If you had 8 projections in one session, it gets quite mumbled up. But one of the, I think, most more inspiring projections, because I've had a lot of different projections. Some of them, or many of them, are just very random experiences that I don't really know what to make out of them. I'm like, okay, that was interesting. I was in a parallel dimension, looked myself in the mirror. I was a different person. I had, a completely different environment around me. And like, I saw giants, I saw midgets. Like, what kind of dimension was I in? Like, all kinds of places like that, where you just kind of appear in different realms that you didn't even know existed. I didn't ever think that I would see giants. I never believed in giants, but you would see everything. There is countless dimensions to visit. This physical dimension is just one of, I don't know how many infinite dimensions there are out there, and everything you can think of and not think of, and in different timelines. You will have dimensions that are, you could go and visit a place where they are really not very developed, maybe haven't even developed fire yet, and then you can go to a place where there's a super advanced astral city with flying cars and healing devices and holographic, displays, and really next level stuff that we don't have here. And that's quite interesting as well, because that's a good place to then go and sort of learn different things and take that information and be able to use it here in the physical, in our timeline, and develop maybe different technologies and stuff like that. Many usages like that, I think, where if you're an engineer, you can sort of reverse engineer things that you've experienced in your astral projections. You can actually use that information to create things in the physical, things that would help humanity, for example. So in one of the experiences that I've had, which was quite inspiring to me, was this was quite a long experience, but the end of it was the more interesting one that I wanted to share, which is after going around in this forest, I was sort of thinking, okay, I'm still here. I don't know how long this experience was, maybe 20 minutes or something. And I was like, I'm still here. Why don't I just do something more important than just running around here, looking at things, talking to random people that I don't know. Let me do something actually of real value. Let me talk to my spiritual guides, And so I made that intention that I wanted to speak to my spiritual guide. And I walk up this little hill, and next thing you know, on the left side of this little cliff, I see this beautiful Pocahontas-looking woman floating above the ground, probably like a half meter above the ground. She was hovering above the ground, and she was just kind of standing there, a little bit like in a video game where you have these different characters that are standing still and you're supposed to go up to them and get information about what you're supposed to do on the in the game. It was a little bit like that, where she was just there waiting for me, and I just knew that, yeah, that's probably my guide. So I went up to her, hey, are you my guide? And she said, yes, I am your guide. So convenient. And we had a conversation. And of course, one of the things that is very important when you do speak to spiritual guides is to have a list of questions that you're going to ask them. And you want to put those questions in order, where the first question is the most important one, because right. It's very possible that in the middle of that conversation, you might be sucked back to your body and the experience is over. So you want to make sure to have your questions fresh in your mind before you project. And so my most important question was, why did I decide to incarnate in this lifetime, in this experience? Like, what was my reason to do so? And I was expecting her to say something like, "Oh, you wanted to do something really big, change the world," or something like that. Like my Aquarius side, I guess, wanted me to hear something in that way. But what she said was nothing to do with that. She was like, you wanted to incarnate because you wanted to experience real, well, not real. She said, because you wanted to experience love and relationships. And that was it. That was really the message. And after that, I did ponder, reflect on what that really means. And it really resonates because I think it doesn't resonate just for my life. I think it resonates for most people, that if it wasn't for love and relationships, this human experience would be quite pointless. And so there's this really good metaphor that I thought about, which was, imagine if you were to wake up one day and you, let's say, live in New York in the middle of the city, and you look out your window and there's nobody. And there's no cars, there's nobody walking the streets, it's just silence. You look on your phone, there's no new messages, just completely silence. You go for a walk on the streets, you don't see anybody. And so somehow you find out that everybody on the whole planet has disappeared. They're just gone. Poof. And also you find out somehow that they're never going to come back. And you're going to be alone for the rest of your life. But the good news is you still have everything else. Like you have, all the money in the world are yours now, and all the houses and mansions and cars, and somehow everything works. You can go to restaurants and there's food that's being served. You can fly somewhere, but everything is happening automatically. There's no one you can talk to. There's no one you can share your experience with. It's just you and all of this stuff that we created. And there's no animals either, by the way. It's just you. There's some plants, but there's no one to talk to, no one to share experiences with. And so the question becomes, how would you feel? How would you feel living that life? Would it feel worthy of living? How long would you go until you start going crazy or depressed and thinking, fuck this, I don't want to be here anymore?
Yeah.
And for me, that definitely feels like that. Like when I think about that, I just definitely feel like, man, life would be so pointless. Like if you're an artist and you create something, if you have nobody to show that thing to, just to yourself, that might be fine for a couple of weeks, but after some time, you're going to get quite depressed and bored, I think. And so love and relationships, relationships between people and the love that we share, and between animals and between everything that we do. I think it's really the key reasons to why we're here. And it's also the key mechanisms that makes us grow on this journey in this human experience.
Yeah, that's very true and very profound. I was imagining myself being in that world you were describing, and I think we would just kind of feel like empty. Like, what's the meaning? What's the point of all this? Even if you had everything you could ever want, but nobody to share it with, it would something would be missing. I think everybody could agree it would feel like something was missing, and that would be that relationship, the love, like you said.
Yeah.
And most people I
Yeah.
talk to, when they have profound experiences or higher self experiences, NDEs, anything, it always comes back to love. And it kind of sounds cliche and
Yeah.
not as fulfilling, but when you really think deeply on it, it's like that's really what it's all about. That relationship, the love, like you have to have somebody else to for there to be love or to be a relationship. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's a good lesson as well, or a good exercise for someone that's very materialistic to really think about this in that way. Why do you need these things that you want to buy, or this big house or this car? Is it because you really need it for your for comfort and you just like to have a nice car, or is it because you are trying to show off, or what is it? What is the reason? If you take away the people, then what does these things have of value? And I think that kind of helps to see what is it that's really important, and maybe you realize, oh, actually I just want to get this cool car just to impress my friends, because really what I want is their love. Oh, so instead of getting this car, I'm just going to figure out how to become better friends with them and become more loving and have a better relationship with them. That's really what I should do instead of buying this stuff, for example.
Are there any other projection experiences you'd like to share? Any stories from your students that you'd like to share?
Yes. So I would like to share some of the students' experiences, because, to be honest, like I feel now that I'm they're teaching people on a regular basis. I have students that have way more interesting experiences than I do, which is lovely. And sometimes I feel a little bit envious too. I'm like, you just started a program. You already had like a profound, like amazing experience. Damn, you're lucky. But I love it too. It's great. And so there's one gentleman, which was quite interesting. I didn't even know this was possible. He had, so he was suffering from a bit of a erectile dysfunction, it's called. And he wasn't sure why it was happening. And he was getting very proficient at astral projecting. So he went out of body and kind of like popped the question, like, hey, why is this happening to me? Why I'm having this problem? Why am I having this difficulty physically? And he was then suddenly taken into what he first thought was some sort of alien landscape or something. And immediately as he got there, he got the information as well that this wasn't an alien landscape. This was actually inside of his body. He was now inside of his veins. And inside of his veins, you could see this black stuff that was forming around the edges of his veins. And he was then taken into his lungs, and he saw this black stuff filling up his lungs. And he got this very uh, deep understanding that this was from all the cannabis that he was smoking, which he thought was nothing to do with his original problem, but it was showing him how it was destroying his body. And then he was taken to his liver, and he saw his liver being filled with a lot of this white stuff, which was a lot of fat from the oil that he was eating. So he got like a interesting health checkup. And afterwards, when he came back, he was so deeply affected by that experience that he just stopped smoking immediately, and he gave all his equipment to his friends, and he never smoked ever since. And he also stopped eating, with oil, and he changed. And it's really interesting because a lot of people, or I would say everyone, pretty much now knows that smoking is not very good for you. You see pictures of horrible things on the packages for cigarettes, and people know it's bad for them, but they still do it. They still smoke, right? But when you have an experience where you see your body getting damaged like this, man, that's when things change. And that's what happened for him. And it was very inspiring to see. And I asked him, like, did you not have any, like, was it difficult to quit? Did you have any cravings? And he's like, no, I didn't have any more like it just, no, I looked at the smoking equipment as my enemies, not as my friends, as I did before. And I saw them as these enemies that would sort of kill me slowly. And I quit. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know that was possible to do with astral projection, that you can go inside of your body.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah, so that's one experience that was very inspiring and different. Then we also have students that have connected with their with deceased loved ones. And so one of my students, her husband had died a year earlier, and she found out that she could actually connect with him through astral projection. And so she came to me, and I taught her how to do it, and she did. And it was very interesting that when she got out of body, her husband was actually waiting for her next to her bed.
Wow.
And she could already feel her presence when she was getting into this in between state, or the hover state, as you like to call it. She could feel that there was a presence next to her bed. And then as she got out, he was there, and they were able to meet again and communicate and have some sort of closure. And she would see him, multiple times, not just one time. And it was very interesting for me to then learn how that was, to understand from her perspective, from her experience, how it was to meet someone, meet someone that she deeply loved that passed away. And it's such a healing experience, because you then know that they are okay, and that they're still around, and you can connect with them if you want to. They're not just disappeared and they're gone forever, and death is not the end. And it also helps you to know that you are not going to die, that you will continue as well after you die physically. So that's a very powerful, I think, very powerful healing experiences to have for people that has suffered a loss of a loved one, which is, I think, such a traumatic experience in our society now, because the way we see life and death is kind of very toxic. And I think that if we would know about astral projection, and know about that we continue after living here, and that there is ways through astral projection to connect with the loved one, I think that people won't fear death as much. And I don't think they would be as destroyed, traumatized when someone they love has passed away, because they wouldn't see it as this horrible thing that just happened. They would see it as this natural thing that happens, which they could then connect with as well, because they have a tool for it. So I would love to see a society where, people knew about these things very well, and people will actually do these things, and people will connect with loved ones, and this will be a completely normal thing. Like, yeah, of course, man, of course you don't just die and disappear. That's crazy. You continue into the astral, dumber, and you can go and visit your parents there when they die. You don't have to worry if they're going to die tomorrow. Don't worry. So it's all about love, my friend. It's all good. I wish that was the case.
That's cool, man. I completely agree. And it's got to be so rewarding to be a teacher and be able to guide people to have those life-changing and healing experiences. So congrats to you, man.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It is definitely, it's definitely a very loving experience to witness these things, having these conversations on a regular basis with students, and seeing the kind of things that they can do, and I learn so much from it. I learn more about the universe in that way, because I see what they're experiencing. It's like all those experiences they have, they feed into to me. And yeah, it's really a beautiful thing. And I hope more and more people will learn about these things, and will have the experiences, because it's really about the experience. It's not so much about reading a bunch of books about it. That's a good beginning, but it's about having the experiences for yourself. That's the real deal.
Yep. The books are just tools and guides. So for everyone listening, the links to the Astral Projection Accelerator program and Florentin's Facebook group will be in the description box of this episode, so you guys can all check it out. And Florentin, to wrap it up, what would you say, based on all of your experience, is your best evidence of the afterlife?
Well, I personally haven't had a sort of experience of the afterlife in an astral projection, but the evidence that I would say I would have is, first will be my personal experience with when my grandfather died. And it was, he died in cancer. This was many years before I learned about astral projection and these kind of things. So he died in cancer. I mean, this was before I even, this was at a time where I wasn't very spiritually knowledgeable. I doubted that, spiritual mediums could read your past or your future. Like all of that stuff seemed a bit woo-woo to me at that time. And I had a spiritual friend, a girl who's much more spiritual than me. And I came to visit her in San Francisco. And this was 3 months after my grandfather had died. And before he died, he told me that he wanted me to stop traveling so much and hang out more with my family, be close to my family. He thought I was working on different movies and traveling the world, but he wasn't happy with that. He wanted me to stay more close to the family. And that's something that no one else has ever told me ever. Like everyone's like, yeah, man, go and travel and see the world and work on movies. That's awesome. Do that. He was the only one that actually told me to not do that. And when I went to San Francisco to meet this friend, she insisted to take me to this powerful mediumship center where they can read things. And I was like, well, I don't believe in that stuff. I don't want to, pay for that. You said, how much was it? 100 euros or $100, whatever it was. I was like, oh, that's a lot. I'm not going to pay that for some woo-woo stuff that I don't believe in. She's like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to pay for it. You go there and you have a reading. It's like, okay, all right, fine. If you want to, all right, cool. So I went there and I sat in this room with these, I think it was 4 or 5 people. And one was the leader that was kind of guiding the session, and the other ones were kind of learning or something. And I was sitting there on a chair in front of them, and they all were closing their eyes. And I was sitting there, just waiting for them to ask me some questions that they will probably use some tricks to find out the answers to. I was very skeptical at that time. And so I was sitting there and I didn't want to give them any information. If they asked me something, I was going to be like super kind of, minimal with what I was going to say, just to not give them any information. But to my surprise, they didn't ask me anything. They just started to tell me things. So they started to tell me about my different incarnations in previous lifetimes and how those lifetimes affect me in this lifetime. And, some of the stuff sounded like, yeah, that could be true. Yeah, I do have some of that, some of this, but it wasn't that convincing. Until one of the ladies said, oh, I'm now getting in contact with a presence. It's an older male. It's your grandfather. He has passed away recently and he wants to communicate. Is it okay if he communicates? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then she said the exact same words that he said before he died. Oh, he wants to say that he thinks you should stop traveling and hang out more with your family. Like she said exactly the same words as he said before he died. And that was like a smack in the face. Then I was like, oh my God, what is going on here?
That's
wait a second. And so I think that was one of those moments where I started to become a believer in the afterlife. And, and of course that opens up so many more things, because then they talked about my previous lifetimes. So is that true? Then I had previous lifetimes. Like it's, it opens up a lot of things then. And my curiosity grew a lot. And so I would say that's one of my best evidences. And I would say in recent years, it's definitely hearing my students' experiences when they meet their loved ones. And they describe to me how they just know that it's them. They don't just think it's them. They don't think it's a dream. They don't doubt. They just know. They're just convinced it was them. And sometimes they also they will tell them information about something that they didn't know, that maybe it doesn't make sense to them. And then they ask maybe their other relatives, well, why would he say this? And they will tell them, oh, because he was really into that when he was young. Did you not know? Like these kind of things happen as well. And I'm getting to see these kind of experiences from students that I've taught that I know wouldn't ever come and lie to me, because they wouldn't serve them to lie to me about their experiences, because that would be very counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and this is the beautiful thing of what I'm doing now. I'm discovering a bunch of things that are very interesting.
That's awesome, man. Florentin, it's been amazing talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Maverick.
For more information about Florentin Ionita and the Astral Projection Accelerator Program, Check out the links in the description box of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today on Evidence of the Afterlife. I'm your host, Maverick Vardager, and I'll see you next time.
Evidence of the Afterlife with Maverick Vardager.